reading people. We've done it for tens of thousands of millions of years. We just don't learn to do it anymore. For somebody to be a narcissist means that they're basically a plague on society.
What do you think are some of the most common reasons why relationships break down?
So relationships are only going to ever work when you sacrifice yourself into the relationship despite everything. I don't think I've ever met a person who fully believes what they are capable of achieving. Don't believe the lies that you tell yourself. And if you can face the truth as to who you really are and what you're really capable of, then you become a powerful individual.
By the way, you're just watching my free therapy session here, guys. Okay, Rick, a massive thank you for doing this. I'm genuinely really excited to have you on the podcast. I think a great place to start, really, before we dive into some really important questions that are hopefully going to be super valuable for everybody listening, I want to know a little bit more about you if we can. Just if you could give us some of the brief highlights and important points as why therapy? What led you down this path that you're on today?
Well, it's a great question. I don't think there's a specific reason why I went down this path. I think it was a set of circumstances when I was younger, quite a difficult upbringing, and seemed to be born with lots of empathy, lots of care for people, and was thrown into situations where that happened to be something that I needed to use. And somebody saw those qualities in me when I was very young and offered to pay for a counselling course for me and an evening class. And I think it would be a level 2 sort of level counselling at the time. I was 17, 18. And I loved it, absolutely loved it. I was fascinated by the way that the mind worked. And at the time I was going to a soup kitchen where it was a punishment, actually. As a punishment, I was told to go to a soup kitchen to help out. It was a bit of I got into a little bit of a fight as a kid, very unusual for me. And I punched a kid who was picking on me as a police car drove past. So
typical.
That was just
of course they would drive by. Brilliant.
Yeah. So the punishment from my father at the time was to go and help out at a soup kitchen. And I just really related to these people because we weren't very well off. But compared to these people, we were, kings and queens, really. And I kind of really connected with them in a way that I wanted to understand how the lives had turned to bring them to this place where, some of the children have shoes on the feet. Okay, it was a number of years ago, but this was real depths of poverty with heroin addicts and alcoholics. And it was, I always felt sorry for myself because, we weren't the most well-off family. But these were real desperate situations. And I wanted to know tell me what's gone wrong in your life or what's your set of circumstances to get you here. And I was absolutely, I ended up going for many years, actually, to the same soup kitchen voluntarily, just to make friends and to learn about people, to talk to them and encourage them. But the lady that ran the soup kitchen, lovely lady called Marion, she recognized the gift, if you like, that I had just to sit with people and connect with them in a way that I wanted to understand and listen. And she was the one that paid for my first counselling course, which was a Wednesday night at Blackpool on Fylde College. And then it went on from there, and I've literally studied ever since. I'm 60 now. I know it's hard for you to fathom, but honestly, I'm 60 years old. So, and I've constantly, and I was just saying to you before, Matt, I'm reading 4 books currently on what I'm interested in. So, and I think I've done, I had to do jobs, motor trade jobs and other jobs, to get by over the years till I got to some level of success. But I've always been passionate, and I think it's that passion that's never, this has never been work for me. It's never been something that I've thought, I have to get up for work, or it's something that I look forward to every new client and every story and every scenario, just to be able to connect with that person, then hopefully help them to find the answers for whatever their situation is, really. So I'm incredibly blessed, really.
So I know that there's over 30 years experience now helping a complete range of different people. As you reflect on that time, is there any kind of standout challenges you've had when working with a client that was one of the most difficult? And if so, what did you learn through that kind of experience?
Okay, well, actually, the standout challenge, Matt, is something that I'm hoping will come through to your clients and guests here tonight. There's no stand. I don't see a standout challenge with any particular client. The standout challenge, and the penny really dropped for me probably in my late 20s, but it didn't fully drop until 4 or 5 years ago. And the standout challenge for me was challenging myself to be honestly the person who I really am. To get myself to a place of complete honesty, to face my dragons, demons, everything about my life, to be completely honest about everything, to really face the reality of who I am, which is very deep and very complex. And I'd worked at that unbeknown to me for many, many years, but it was only probably maybe 5 or 6 years ago that I really sat down and contemplated my navel, because I'm here listening to people's incredible stories and the catastrophes and the devastation to all the life. And in some shape or form, you can almost feel very hypocritical or like imposter syndrome because you've not been that person. And it caused me to really challenge to myself to really look at the quality of who am I as a person and ask myself some really deep questions. Am I always really honest with myself? Have I really got my life together? Am I making the right decisions for me to make my life as best as it could be so that I'm in that place to honestly be the best person that I could be for other people? And that's the biggest challenge. Am I doing something so incredibly stupid that is causing me not to be as good as I can be? And that is sitting down and sometimes facing some real harsh truths about who you are as a human being. And it's uncomfortable. It's not, that these things, but I'd say that has been the biggest challenge that I've had, and definitely the thing that has opened my eyes up to see humanity in a way that suits me, in a way to see it, to make things a bit better for myself. That's complex. And I don't think, to be honest, Matt, I don't think that would have come to me at 30 years old. I think after 50, you've got that lifetime of wisdom and experience. And, you've made mistakes, you've got things wrong. You have the humility to say, that is all my mistakes. I take full responsibility for all of that. And try and pull your life into a way where you go, I want more for myself so that I'm the best person that I can be to give to others, so that if their life's better, the world's a bit better, then everybody's better off. And it's not being complacent about who you are, but facing the challenges of who you could be every day to make yourself a little bit better.
How well do you feel you're handling that challenge at present? And how are you handling it?
I'd say I'm 50% there.
And what would need to change to increase that score? And obviously, I'm asking from the standpoint of how we can all overcome that challenge.
Look. Every one of my clients who sits with me, the first thing I say to them is, there's a golden rule, and it's the golden rule not for therapy, but it's the golden rule for life for everybody. And it's dead simple. It's really powerful. It will absolutely give you an awesome life. And that's the simplicity of always tell the truth, never lie. Now that is a complex statement. And so what I just said to you is I had to sit down and be really truthful about who I was, what I wanted, and where I was going to go, and not lie to myself.
And to yourself, I think that's a key phrase, isn't it? To yourself. So many of us lie to ourselves because we convince ourselves we might take an easier route. It's easier to just say yes to people and convince ourselves it was the right decision, for example, right?
Oh yeah, sure, yeah. One of the things that I did have to face, which was quite a long time ago, I would always try and do things independently. So if I was working with a team or with somebody, I wouldn't take a problem to them. I'd try and fix it myself because I didn't want to burden them with that problem and make them feel bad or insecure. And I soon learned that, look, if I can't accept that I am failed and lack of experience or wisdom. And if I can't go to people that know more than I know and ask those questions and learn from them, I'm going to fall down flat every single time. And I learned that always ask, always be humble, always accept the fact that I'm not perfect. I'll never be perfect, but I can get some answers by being humble enough to say, look, I'm just stupid. Help me out here. And that is a very powerful tool.
So it's having the courage and the ability, I guess, to put the ego to one side and be confidently stupid, because that's where we can learn the most and we can grow, right?
Of course it is. And people, we have a wrong flip on what courage is. We had a chap here the other day, 55 years old, and clearly burdened by lots of deaths and grief. And the reason why he was burdened, he got to a place of being over anxious and not coping well because he'd stored up all this grief over 3 people that were close to him over about 10 years. And, he was sort of saying, well, we're men. He says, we're not weak. We don't do these things. And I said, it takes more courage to go to a friend and break down in tears than it does to run away and hide. And that's what I said. Go away and go to your father's grave and tell him your story. And if you break down and cry, then that's a mark of courage. That's a mark of saying, here I am, failings and all, but I'm bearing my soul to you. Because I might be vulnerable, but I'm also courageous. And that courage will always oversee that vulnerability every time without exception.
Beautiful. I want to talk about relationships.
Okay.
We've got a big subject here. It feels like right now, this kind of traditional relationship of people getting together, getting married, staying together till death, it feels like an old-fashioned concept in the sense that it feels like a lot of people change relationships, are in and out of relationships. There's a lot of, dating apps, social media. In your experience from working with clients and indeed from everything you've studied and that you've witnessed, what do you think are some of the most common reasons why relationships break down and people are not staying together?
Selfishness. Hedonistic desires to have what you want without committing yourself to an equal human being who can support you through life. That's it. Look, when I got married, and I'd say marriage, I'm very, very pro-marriage. And the reason why I'm pro-marriage is because if you don't set a standard, if you don't have rules and boundaries and regulations in place, what have you got? So for example, when I married my wife, I said, look, you and I, forsaking all others in sickness and health, etc., 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 you and I are handcuffed together for the rest of our lives. We're not going anywhere. That's it. That's the rules. That's what we promised before our friends and before God. We don't get away. That means if we have an argument, neither of us can say, I'm off, I've had enough. That's not on the table.
So immediately that's removed. That's not even an option.
It's not an option. It's not an option. Now, if you do not have if you're in a relationship and you do not have the boundaries in place, the rules and regulations, and the guy decides to stay out till 5 o'clock every Sunday morning and come home stinking of women's perfume and booze with cocaine on his mustache, you can't say anything because there's no rules. I mean, it's not right. It's morally wrong. But where's the boundaries? You haven't got any boundaries. And if she wants to choose to do that, then who's to say that that's right and what's wrong? Because you have a different value on what you perceive to be good for you in life. Well, good luck figuring that out with 2 very complex human beings with very different values and morals. So relationships are only going to ever work when you sacrifice yourself into the relationship, understanding that the other person should do the same, and you both consistently work at making that relationship work despite everything.
So it's having really clear boundaries, rules, agreement, understanding each other's values, but you need to communicate that up front, right?
Oh, of course you do. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What would you say then if somebody's in a new relationship? What do you think is a healthy conversation, to have in those early stages? What are the sort of things that we should be speaking about? What are the questions we should be asking?
Okay, so when it comes to forming relationships, the literature around forming relationships indicate very strongly When two people meet, the relationship is the relationship is formed within the first 3 to 6 months, and that will dictate whether or not the relationship is going to have any longevity to it or not. So those first 3 to 6 months, the behaviors of both parties, how the couple interact within those 3 to 6 months, you can predict over 90% whether that relationship will last or not. Now, currently, 4 out of 5 relationships are failing. And that's because the first 3 to 6 months of the relationship, no rules, no boundaries, no conversation, no trust in place, and everything falls apart. But you carry on with the relationship because it's the thing to do.
And I guess the other thing, Rick, is a lot of us, well, all of us to some degree, put on a certain facade in the early days, right? We want them to see the best version of us.
Yeah,
we maybe are only seeing the best version of them. We've got an idealistic version in our mind. So that's got to be broken down, right?
Okay, yeah, and you're absolutely right. And what I alluded to before was about finding yourself and being true to yourself. Now, what happens in relationships, if a man and a woman meet, what we do is we look at that person, and what we do is we take in the information from that person, what they say, the body language, the tone of voice, etc., etc. But what we do with that information is we filter it through our own perceptual filters. And our perceptual filters are our subconscious traits, if you like. So our morals, our ethics, our boundaries, our history of relationships, our upbringing, all of those things in the subconscious that make us who we are as a person, we take that information, we filter it through that, and then we project it onto our vision board of who we think that person is, or more specifically, who we hope that person is, based on how we filtered that information. Now, if I'm not right here, if I'm insecure, if I'm not value myself, not good enough, or I'm selfish, we're going to filter that information to project that person onto that board completely different from who they really are in reality. Well, that's going to be a huge problem for you.
How do we avoid that?
Get yourself right. First of all, make sure that you're ethical, moral, truthful all the time, good empathy, good generosity, but able to stand up for yourself. That's massively important. And then if you're talking practically how to avoid that, then are we alluding to 3 rules here? So I'll give you a little bit of advice for relationships. Okay. And this is great.
Thanks, Rick, because I need it. By the way, you're just watching my free therapy session here, guys. Go on, give me the advice.
So I'll tell you that now. Okay, so me and a couple of our team, there's 3 of us in the team, all professionals. We've studied relationships for a long time. I'm a relationship specialist. The other guy's one of the girls is a sex therapist, and the other one's an adolescent specialist. So we've got a large range of kind of human behaviors. And we looked at what was the reason there was this huge increase in relationship failure. It went up 10% over about 9 years. Well, the first reason was relationship failure was measured when a relationship was either divorced or they split up. And that was the measurement for the end of the relationship. The parameters for measuring a relationship are slightly different now, in that you can be in a relationship, but staying together for financial reasons or children or property or whatever, but the relationship actually, it's failed even though you're together. And so there's been a big spike in it, but the parameters have changed slightly. So if 4 out of 5, and actually I asked my wife when this was going on, we were looking at it, and I said, we know quite a lot of couples. And I said, how many people do we know, couples do we know that are actually in a happy relationship? It turns out we don't know anybody. I mean, they're okay and they put up with each other. But the relationships that they drink too much, they never talk, they fall out all the time, they're always not talking, it's just like loads of stuff that you wouldn't expect to be in a decent relationship. So we actually don't know anybody that I would say is in a reasonably good relationship. So the 4 out of 5 statistic kind of fits. So let's get to the point here, Rick. If you want to start a relationship off, Matt, and we'll target you specifically, you want to start a relationship, then first of all, you've got to get yourself right. Now, remember that we are a mass of emotions. We're so infinitely emotional and confusing that we'll never figure that out. And so what happens is when you drift into a relationship, you meet somebody, maybe online, talking through a digital format or whatever. It doesn't really matter. But there's 3 rules that if you apply these 3 rules will give you every chance of finding the right person. Okay. Now the first rule is, so let's suppose you're chatting on a dating site or whatever. The first rule is when you connect with that person is don't care whether that person likes you or not. Okay, so you have an interaction and you're telling each other about, you're throwing those little bits of bait in to draw information out. Don't care whether they like you or not. Don't care about what they think about what you said.
In other words, that enables you to just be more authentically you, right? You're not going to censor who you are.
You've hit the nail on there. And the reason for that is because we have emotion and we have intellect. And they work in this way. When you get emotional, the intellect moves into the background. And when you look at things intellectually, you're less emotional. Now, when you start to worry about what somebody thinks about you, or you care about, whether they like you, or you're bothered because they haven't put a kiss on the end of the message, or they haven't texted you when they said you would, what you do is you drift into an emotional state. And you want to look at the relationship from the beginning intellectually, because when you go to an emotional state, then what happens in the mind, you get lots of oxytocin and all the various neurochemicals that actually fog your view of what's really going on. Oh, I hope he's really lovely. I hope she's amazing. And this intellectualism goes into the background. So you start to filter that information through those filters to project onto the screen what you hope that person is that probably isn't right. Because it's that emotional investment early in the relationship that blinds you to the reality of who that person is. So the first rule is don't care. Just, don't care if they don't text you. Don't care if they don't put a kiss on it. Don't care. Just don't care. It's not to say that you can't be interested and have a decent conversation, but do not invest yourself emotionally by worrying whether they like you or not. So that's the first rule. And that'll, again, keep you intellectual, not emotional. Rule 2 is find out as much about that person as you can and tell them as little as possible about yourself. So knowledge is power. Now, if you're talking to somebody at a date, etc., and you tell them all about you and what you like and what your hopes and what your dreams are, what you're doing is you're giving them an emotional value. You're giving them something that they can use to manipulate you emotionally. Oh, yeah, I like football too. Oh, yeah, I love skiing. Or, yeah, you're just like me. And, often abusive people, male and female, will tell you the things that they think you want to hear to get you to a place where they want you to be. And that's not always good.
That's massive. And it brings you around to that thing that I was saying earlier about this facade. The more information that someone's getting, the more they can create this idealistic, fake version of themselves, right? So how to avoid that is don't give them too much.
That's it. And stay intellectual. And when we was at university learning the basic counselling skills, a lot's changed since then. But then you'd have like a completely uniform room, same chair, sat equilibrium, nothing personal in the room. And the idea was that you were just a sounding board for the client. You were a mirror. So you didn't let the client know anything about yourself. And so we used to go to the pub and start conversations with people and talk to them for an hour without actually telling them anything about ourselves. So they may say, oh, you're going on holiday this year, Rick. And I go, well, how about yourself? Wow, Greece sounds amazing. Have you been before? Wow, that's really interesting. And so you get people talking about themselves without letting them know anything. And what you're doing is you're learning about that person. Because what we're really good as human beings, Matt, is we're really good at reading people. We've done it for tens of thousands of millions of years. Body language, attitude, we're really good at it. We just don't learn to do it anymore. And when you really listen to somebody and you take in what they're saying and you ask yourself, what are they really saying behind those words? And what's all that about? You start to really, really understand that person. And listening is it's a lost skill these days. But the more you listen and the more you understand that person, and first of all, you're going to quickly find out when they're telling lies. You're going to see the red flags massively. And what's more, you're not giving them anything to feed you with to put you in a vulnerable place. And so you're keeping that intellect in front of the emotion so that you can see that person for exactly who they are.
And
No
this is a
emotional
great skill
attachment.
that can be applied to all relationships, right? Whether it be building a business, friendships,
Absolutely.
career
Absolutely.
relationships. Yeah. Okay. So number one is not to care too much. Number two is basically ask more than you tell. Give us the golden third one, Rick.
Nobody likes rule number 3. Well, particularly not the youngsters. Well, rule number 3 is don't have sex for at least 3 months.
I thought you was going to say that. Like I was going to say as a joke, oh, don't have sex. And you said it. Bloody hell, Rick. Are we
Well, look,
sure? Like, is it doomed if we have sex?
okay, so look at it this way. Emotional and intellectual value. Once you enter into a sexual relationship, look at the way the neurology works. The two most vital systems that we have to keep us alive are the fight or flight system. There's something scary, run away or fight it. If you don't, you're dead.
Yeah.
And procreation. If we don't procreate, we go extinct. And so sex and keeping the species going contains a high value emotion. That's why it's really pleasurable. Because if we don't do it, we're out of business. And so it contains this high value of emotional connection with lots of different neurochemicals, emotional value, etc., etc. And so if we drift into high value sexual relationships too early, before we really get to know that person, then what happens is that emotional value gets right in the way and you can't see the person for who they really are, because you've got, oh, he's amazing and life's so good and the chemistry is wonderful. And your friend is saying, well, I don't like the way he speaks to you. He's a bit aggressive. And you say, oh, you don't want me to be happy. And 6 months later, you're walking around with black eyes and wondering why your life's falling apart, because you entered into the relationship without figuring out what it was all about, because you were in an emotional state all the time. Nobody
So
likes rule
just
3, but what's 3 months? If you want to have a lifetime of love and relationships, sacrifice it. Get it right at the beginning.
okay, Rick. No worries. I'm definitely editing that out of this podcast before I put it out. There was just 2 rules. Anybody watching, just 2. All right, moving on. Thank you for that, Rick. Some really interesting stuff there, and I can see with the chat as well. I mean, one thing Lynn just said is it's so hard to not care. Have you got any advice, just super quick before we move on? How can we not care?
Okay, it's not that you're not going to care forever.
Yeah.
You know, the way that psychopathy is now, when you look at the society that we live in, we've got these formats, we've got Tinder, you can dial up anything. You can get anything you want today. The values are really cheap. And there's hardly any value in anything that should be valued these days. So it's not that you're not going to care. Of course it's not. It's just that you don't want to build that care. And care is based on trust. They run very close together. You don't want to do that until you've got the sense or the feeling that person is right for you. And then you start to build. And that is a two-way thing, by the way. You don't think, oh, I'm starting to really like this person because I think they're right and truthful and all the rest of it. That has to be reciprocated. There has to be that communication to say, look, we've been knocking around for a few months now, and we seem to be getting on well, and we seem to be truthful, and there's no red flags, and I'm happy to talk to you about pretty much everything. And you build on that, and then you start to care. For the first 3 months, you care about yourself because you're the most important person in any relationship.
Narcissism. I know this is something that you've studied in depth and continue to study right now. I know you said that's the books you're reading now and so on. One thing that I was interested in that you touched upon before when we've spoken is, I believe the phrase was cultural narcissism, or it might have been societal narcissism, but I just wondered if you could explain what that is versus kind of the standard what a narcissist is.
Okay, so interestingly, a lot of people have heard the phrase narcissistic, and it's bouncing around a lot more than it ever has been in the last 10 years, I would say. But a lot of people, even to today, mature people, really don't understand what a narcissist is or what narcissistic behavior is. I've had women come to me that have been married for 21 years, have watched a couple of my videos on narcissism, realized they're in a narcissistic relationship, and then come to see me to say, what's the deal? So people don't really understand narcissism. Now, narcissism is, for somebody to be a narcissist, it means that they're basically a plague on society, because everything about life is about themselves. they're going to stand on you to get their own way. They're going to get, no empathy. They're going to just destroy you in a manipulative, cruel way. And it really is probably the worst behaviors that a human being can have. Now,
are they born with it? Is it a narcissism
so
born or made?
it's arguably 40 to 60% genetic. So generally, there's a narcissistic parent, usually an empathic parent and a narcissistic parent. And children that are born to narcissists seem to either go one way or the other. They either learn the narcissistic behaviors, because there's a lot of advantage to that, by the way, or they become like the empath, the mother or the father who's empathic, and go the other way. So when I've spoken to victims of narcissism over the years, it's very clear that, I just chatted yesterday actually, he's an 11-year-old daughter who's clearly in a training school for narcissism, and a 6-year-old boy who's much more empathic, who's going to go more his way, let's say. But narcissism is genetic, so you're kind of born with it. Doesn't mean to say you have to be a narcissist, because you've still got those lifestyle choices, I would say, and you can learn things differently. But it's the narcissistic personality disorder. Okay, so NPD is it's classed as a mental illness. Okay, it's in the DSM-5. It's recorded as a mental illness, and the reason why it's a mental illness is because if you're narcissistic, there's no evidence at all that you can change.
So
literally no evidence at all.
Does that mean
if you can
there's
change,
no
you're
cure?
not a narcissist? If you change, then there's something about you that isn't narcissistic, because you're prepared to accept your faults and your failings and your vulnerability to do something about that. A narcissist would never do that because he's perfect. And so these are fixed personality types that go through life with no conscience at all that they can ruin relationships and destroy children's lives and just crap on everybody from a great height with no consequences to them at all. Everybody else becomes a victim. Now, in answer to your question, there's some evidence coming out now where there's borderline personality disorders. So what that means is we all have elements or traits of narcissism in us. So we like to take a selfie, or we like to admire ourselves, or be proud, or show off a bit, or like the conversation to be about us. That doesn't make us narcissistic by any measure. It just means to say that we've all got narcissistic traits. But what there is now, and this is actually one of the books I'm reading, it's called The Epidemic of Narcissism. I couldn't get it in this country, I had to get it from America. But as social media and children are subject to less parenting, let's say, and more social media influence from the channels of social media and that promotes narcissistic behaviors, then people are learning these behaviors from a very young age, at say 8, 9, or 10. Now, if you learn narcissistic behaviors, there's a lot of advantage in being narcissistic. You don't have to care. You can get everything you want. You can destroy people's lives to your own benefit. To an average, good, sensible thinking person, who want to destroy somebody's life? But look, once you get into that way of thinking that everything is about you and you can have everything you want and life's perfect, and you start to live in that fantasy world in which they live, then you adopt that. It's really hard to get out of. Now, arguably, if you learn behaviors and you're not NPD, arguably you can unlearn those behaviors. Now, I'm not sure that that's true, because again, this is sort of new discoveries about narcissism. But my fixation on narcissism is narcissists do not change, and you have to be very, very careful around them. Very careful. They are not good people.
AKA avoid at all costs, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm currently working with 5/6, all females as it happens, it's not always females, who are working their way out of narcissistic relationships. Now, when they're sucked into the narcissistic relationship, the soul is sucked out of them. You become a shell of a person. You lose all your self-confidence, who you were as a person. When you look back to who you were before that relationship, you're nothing like that outgoing, bubbly, social creature that was a butterfly, because the narcissist sucks all that out of you and brings you to a place of codependency on them. Everything is about them. You must be codependent on them. And so you become trauma bonded, which is emotionally attached to the narcissist, which is really difficult to get out of, really difficult. And so I'm working with, and I do work with a lot with women who are escaping these narcissistic relationships. And they're all completely, the lack of self-worth, the lack of value, everything about them has disappeared. And so part of the process of recovery is to learn to stand up to the narcissist so that you can get your confidence and your self-worth back and find yourself again. And that's very, very uncomfortable. But if you can stick to the things that work to beat a narcissist, you can come out much, much stronger. But it's very, very difficult if you've been in a relationship for 10 or 20 years and you've lost that sense of identity and you've no idea who you are anymore. And that's the common theme. You know, I'll say you don't sound like you know who you are anymore. And they say, no, I look into my past, it's been a lie. My present's fallen apart now because I've got no husband who I thought he was. And I look into my future, what I thought was a predictable, lovely future, that's disappeared as well. And so you find yourself in this void of who am I, what's life all about, and where am I going? And that is so confusing and breaks you. So, you know, there's lots of ways of recovering from that, obviously. Yeah. And there's lots of ways to defeat the narcissist, which I thoroughly enjoy doing. But
you're basically a superhero, Rick. That's your job, isn't it? You're just not wearing your cape today. I love it.
No, I'm not. See, look, Matt, I'm only as good as the people that I work with. And I say this all the time. When a client sits with me, my life's good, but they have to do all the work. And if my client doesn't apply themselves to get them the best life that they want, then I'm no good.
It just got me thinking as well, just hearing you speak, and about this difference between obviously the sort of stereotypical diagnosed narcissist versus these narcissistic traits that are being perhaps more and more common with the rise of things like social media and people growing up with social media promoting narcissism. Kind of brings it back to the relationships when we say why traditional relationships are maybe not holding out. Would you say that that's a big part of it is because we're on social media, it's promoting selfishness, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's the increase in psychopathic behavior, you know, that we can be selfish and have everything we want without having to give everything back. You know, I can go out and have a one-night stand. There's no consequence to that. You know, obviously I'm married, I wouldn't do anything like that. But basically we can pretty much do anything we want without any consequence now. And because there's no consequence, that just frees us up to be to not have any rules, to not have any guidelines, call them morals if you like, call them ethics. But there's no boundaries in place for how we should structure society, particularly with young children, as to how they're going to grow up to be socialized, good thinking, hardworking, etc., decent people. Those boundaries have either disappeared or become blurred now. And you know, children can be almost anything they want to be. You know, with a gender fluid and all of these things that's going on. Well, where's the boundaries? Where's the rules? Where's the guidelines? And you'll find that, and again, this is documented, where people go into these fringe personality traits, let's say, they suffer the highest rates of depression. There's no guidelines, there's no boundaries. There's nothing to hold the sanity together. We need rules and guidelines to keep us sane. When you've not got those, you've got nothing to keep you in the boundaries of sanity. And so you'll slip into the realms of depression or worse.
Let's talk about now achieving goals and success. There's something I think you sort of touched upon, and I may have misunderstood this, but I think what you said is when it comes to helping males achieve their goals, and obviously we're generalizing here, and females achieving their goals, there's a slight difference in the approach. Is that true? And if so, can you talk us through it?
There is a slight difference, but I don't think it's relevant. I think that male and female have different strengths and weaknesses, let's say. And for me, the ideal society is that male and female work together within specific roles. Now, I'm all for, I'll state this on the record, I'm all for equality as, you know, females and females, but we still have specific roles that are millions of years old. You know, when it comes to caring, women are more empathic, they're generous, etc., etc. And by nature, men are more violent. So, for example, 99% of the people that are going to get killed in wars are going to be men. We're more violent. We're going to go to war. 99% of bricklayers are men. 99% of coal miners are men, because that's an aggressive role that men would do better just by genetics. They wouldn't expect women to go to war, or I mean, they've got that choice. Of course they are. I'm not saying they shouldn't have that choice, but there are certain roles that we do better when we're men and women. Now, when it comes to success, my personal belief is, well, first of all, I don't think I've ever met a person who fully believes what they are capable of achieving. I think everybody, and myself included, we limit ourselves to actually what we can achieve, what we're actually capable of. And that's really based on our upbringing, what we were told, you're not good enough or you'll never amount to anything. And we have these limited self-beliefs that hold us back. And so we kind of put a ceiling on where we are. We have an expectation for our lives that we can go so far, but that's all that's expected of us. Now, that's a belief, okay? And that belief is formed in our mind through repetitive thought, that it's like we've hypnotized ourselves into having that belief, and that's all we've got. And that's the program that runs below the surface all the time, that is the expectation of our life. Now, my question is why have that belief based on something that you learned when you were 5 years old, 7 years old, 10 years old? You're not 5, you're not 7, you're not 10. You're a mature adult. And the answer to this is so easy. People don't think anymore, Matt. They don't think. Everything's done for us. Social media, we'll Google it. We'll talk to people and take it at surface level. We'll look at a positive quote on Facebook and go, wow, that's amazing. Changes nothing. Because we don't think, we don't dig into it. We don't realize the consequences of that quote or what that person said. And we don't think to go into the depths of it and what's all that about and really question it. And when you learn to really think, and you really learn to identify with who you are and what you want, and you start to dig into that, then you start to get some answers that are relevant. And when you get those answers and you really understand yourself, then you can start to build your goals and your dreams and everything else that massively smashes your expectations of who and what you think you are. Now, that's not difficult. It's actually really easy. But we don't do that anymore. Very, very few people do. And I say, look, if you can learn to think, and if you can think, you can speak, then you're going to be a really powerful person. And honestly, my experience, my life, the experience of lots of people I've worked with who are incredibly successful now. And okay, what's success? Relationships, finances, social circles, health, etc., etc. Define it how you like. My experience is what you believe to be true is what you're going to get. And I will never argue it. People will challenge me about that, and I'll just say, that's your belief. But it isn't mine. And you live that belief, that's fine. If you want to believe that you can't do things, I say you're right. But it's not my belief.
Yeah. And how's it working for you as well? That's the question. I think what I'm hearing as well, it's that thing of people do a lot of surface level thinking, a lot of instant gratification. Like you said, the motivational quote, oh, I feel amazing, but then do nothing with it. And it's about depth, right? It's about critical thinking. It's about going further. And yeah, going beneath the surface, right?
Yeah, sure. Look, how many self-help books are there on the planet, Matt? Let's say 1 billion.
Yeah, I've got a few of them.
Okay. Now, if they worked, I'd be out of a job.
Yeah.
They don't work. They're interesting. They give a dopamine hit in the moment to make you feel that kind of, oh, I can be amazing.
I'm sure you've heard the phrase there. It's shelf development, which I'm doing very well.
Shelf development. I haven't heard that actually, but yeah. And these, but look, a lady said to me the other day, she travels a lot around the world. She works on a lot of big boats, etc. She said, oh, I want some really good books. I want to buy half a dozen. I said, just buy one. And I recommended a book. I said, and read it 10 times.
Mm-hmm. And apply what you've learned, right?
That's the key. Familiarize yourself with it. Really think about what it's saying. Think about how that works for your life. What do you need to change in your life that's going to get that for you? Because you'll do it. But don't read the book and say it's interesting and pick up the next one and say that's interesting. Stick to one book and live it. Make sure it's applicable to your life, of course, but then make the changes. Every day, do something different that makes you more successful.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And just on that idea of achieving goals, something that we hear all the time is consistency is key. And I know that a really common challenge for people is remaining consistent, is overcoming procrastination and, low mood, low motivation. What would be some of your advice to help somebody finally make those shifts where they're consistent versus being a yo-yo, where they have a good month, good day, bad day, that kind of thing?
Yeah, okay. So the first thing I'd say about that is everybody's unique and individual, and people want to be coaches, etc., or you want to be athletes, whatever you want to be. That's fantastic. That's a wonderful thing. But as I alluded to right at the beginning of this talk, that first and foremost, it's about getting yourself to the place that you need to be. And that's an ongoing journey, by the way. Now, when we talk about limited self-beliefs, these are programs that we run subconsciously. As I said before, it runs below the surface and it makes us think and feel a certain way without us even knowing it. It's our programming of who we are as a person. And these things run below the surface. We don't really know what's going on there, but you just feel like, I can't be bothered today, or. So the first thing I'd say is work on yourself to get yourself, clean up your past. Sit on your bed and say to yourself, what do I need to do to really clean my past up? So I'm really always telling the truth, never lie. That I'm not being malevolent towards anybody. I'm not gossiping and bitching. I'm living a good life, and I'm caring and compassionate. And tidy your room up first. Get yourself in a great position where your conscience is as clear, I would say, as can be. Your conscience is clear and you know you're living a good life, you're always telling the truth, and you've got your act together. You're going to bring that all together as a foundation to discipline yourself to do the things that you know you need to do every day. Now, when you look at the big picture, of course, when you look at a business or a life, it's a roller coaster. Okay, so you're here and you want to be here. It's never that. It's this. You go up and you drop and you fall into a big hole and your life collapses and things just don't work for you and you lose motivation and you procrastinate. While you're in that hole, and this is the key to success, ask yourself the question, what do I need to learn about myself while I'm in this hole so that as I push forward, I'm not going to fall into the same hole again and I've become a better person? What stupid thing am I doing that's put me in this hole? And take full responsibility for that. And I mean full responsibility to make sure that you learn something about yourself, to fix it, even if it takes you a little while, so that you can push on and get to where you need to be. Now, success can come very, very easily to some people, and to other people it's much more difficult. It's more complex than just a simple answer. But it's always a roller coaster, and it's always a challenge, and it's always uncomfortable. If it's not, you're not moving anywhere. So you've got to go through these dips, and these things aren't going so well, or I haven't had enough inquiries, or I'm not earning enough money. And you've got to step back and say, okay, why? I'm taking responsibility. This is my fault. I'm taking responsibility to this. What am I going to do to put this right? What am I going to learn about myself now to push forward? Now, you might need some help in that. You might need to, like yourself, some guidance. Or, you offer those guidance and that encouragement and motivation. And you should always ask for that because, we're all failed. Like I say, I ask for advice all the time. But that's what you need to do. What am I doing wrong? And if you ask yourself, you'll get the answer. No, it might not be the answer you want to hear, because it might be something you've got to fix that you don't really want to fix because you've got some sort of advantage like that. Well, actually, I like getting drunk on a Friday and Saturday night, Oh, it's only Friday and Saturday night. No, you don't recover from that till about Tuesday. You just lost half the week. Where's your focus?
I don't recover till Thursday, Friday. It literally, in terms of being sharp and feeling at my best, it's days and days.
Absolutely. Look, I'm not anti-alcohol, but if you want to be the sharpest you be, I'll have a drink on a Saturday, not every Saturday. But if I've got something I know that's massively important that needs my focus, I won't drink for a week before that event. And I don't get drunk, by the way, Matt. I'll get slightly tipsy, 9:30, I'm having a cup of decaf tea. But it still affects me, and I'm still not as sharp as I want to be. So, you've got to ask yourself these things. What am I doing? Am I drinking too much? Have I not got my act together? Am I malevolent? Am I bitchy? Am I not kind? Am I not generous? Am I not telling the truth? Am I not standing up to the people that need to know the truth? And that clears your conscience. And once you clear your conscience, you look ahead, there's no fog there. It's clear. You can look at the things that you're aiming at because there's nothing there in the way, and you can aim at them and go and move towards them successfully because you've got yourself right in the first place.
Rick, this is brilliant. I feel like we've just started, and I'm aware we've got to start wrapping up because I definitely want to make plenty of time for the Q&A. I know there'll be a lot of questions people want to ask, and if you don't, I'm just going to ask more myself because I've got loads we've not even touched upon. But Rick, thank you so much. I'm just going to start bringing us to the last couple of questions. A question that I ask all my guests. This is the Success School podcast, and a lot of kind of the ethos behind Success School is kind of that idea that traditional education doesn't necessarily equip us with the best knowledge to live a successful life, whether that be nutrition, well-being, mindset, finances, business, all this kind of stuff. So based on that, based on your life experience and everything you've done in your career and indeed in your life aside from your career, if you was to give the listeners now 3 important life lessons, 3 things that are going to enable them to live a truly successful, fulfilling, happy life that we're not necessarily taught in traditional education, what would be those 3 lessons?
Well, I'm going to repeat some of the things I've already said. But again, the first lesson is always tell the truth, never lie. And that lesson is so powerful. So, when you're told a lie, it doesn't feel good. And it doesn't feel good for lots of neurological reasons. It's just chaos and it goes on forever. You don't want that chaos. But if somebody says something to you at work that you don't agree with, or let's say in a close, intimate relationship, and you let that slide, then what you're doing is you're saying to that person, that's fine for you to continue to say that. And that means to say that you're going to hold on to that negative emotion because you've not challenged something that's wrong. And so again, your conscience isn't clear. Now, learning to tell the truth is not just about being honest. It's about being what I call the dragon of adversity. If you can always tell the truth to somebody, I don't like those behaviors. This made me feel this way. We need to talk about this. Now, you can be generous, kind, empathic, caring, all the lovely things, the soft qualities. You do that. Don't balance that up with the dragon of adversity. The ability to challenge somebody just by telling the truth, then you just pray. You will just be destroyed by everybody. So telling the truth isn't just about making you feel good. It's also about protecting yourself from the things out there that come to get you. And you just challenge them with the truth. I don't like the way you spoke to me about that. That was a bit aggressive. Can we make sure we don't do that again or the relationship's over? And when they do it again, you say the relationship's over. You don't say, I told you not to do that. Don't do that again. You say, that's it. You're protecting yourself. Because, of course, if you let it slide 2 or 3 times, that's then familiar in the relationship, and you've just resigned yourself to a lifetime of physical or narrative abuse. So telling the truth protects you, keeps your conscience clear, and it looks after you moving forward. It's not comfortable having these conversations with people. But if you don't, then you're in line with that person, encouraging them to continue to be the bad person. So always tell the truth, never lie. The second lesson I'd say is don't believe the lies that you tell yourself that you're not good enough. Nearly all of my clients, nearly all, if not all of them, will say to me, I don't feel good enough. And we'll always dig into that and have a look at that over a number of sessions, let's say. And all of the time, all of my clients have every reason to feel good enough. What they've done is they've listened to lies or been conditioned through abusive relationships and had the joy stripped out of them, the confidence stripped out of them, and they just don't feel good enough. But all of those things that make you not feel good enough are lies. And if you can face the truth, there's that word again, as to who you really are and what you're really capable of without listening to those lies, then you become a powerful individual. So stop believing that you're not good enough because you are. Look, I've told you the story of the best looking man in the pub, Matt. You know, and this is my kind of, I don't know what motto or theme or whatever it is. Look, everybody knows I'm the best looking man in the pub. Everybody knows Rick is the best looking man in the pub. I go into the pubs in the village here, and everybody knows I'm the best looking man in the pub. Now that sounds kind of vain and arrogant, doesn't it? But I mean, I might be sat in a pub and somebody will tap me on the shoulder, and I'll turn around, and there'll be somebody there with a big cheesy grin, and they'll go, "Ha ha," and they'll point at me and say, "The second best looking man in the pub's here." And I go, "Nice try, but you're not quite there yet." Now, what they're trying to say is they're the best looking man in the pub. Well, look, they're not, because I'm there. When I leave, that's fine. They can have that role.
Rick's just recited a conversation that me and him had in the pub the other week. This is what we said.
Well, yeah. Well, the way to look, it's not about appearances. When I walk into a pub, and it's not arrogant, I do not give a monkey's what anybody thinks about me. This is all God's given me. We must have had a joke on that day, but it doesn't matter. This is what God's given me. I'm happy, I'm successful, I love life, I'm confident, and I've got some qualities that I've worked very hard at. And, you know, life's never been easy, but nobody's going to pull me down because of the way that they think or their attitude towards me, because they are not valuable in my life. And that makes me the best looking man in the pub. And what I say to people, you know, people that I meet, I say, look, you've to aspire to be the best looking man or woman in the pub. Don't care what people think about you, what they say about you, because that's their problems. Aspire to believe in yourself, that you are good enough, that you can achieve so much more than what you think you're capable of, because actually you can. The evidence is there. So don't listen to people, and don't listen to the lies you tell yourself. Believe in yourself that you honestly can achieve 600 times more than what you think you can, because you can. You really can. And the third one, I would say, get rid of malevolence. I've alluded to this before. But what does that mean? Okay. Malevolence is within us all. So we all have the capacity to, malevolence is to do wrong or evil to other people, almost voluntarily, let's say. Hitler was malevolent. Stalin, Mao, all these, you know, obviously, the millions of people dead. But they're obviously malevolent. But how about is it with me when I decide to talk about somebody that's upset me behind their back and slag them off? It's malevolent. And so if you can get to a place where you're not malevolent, that you're not voluntarily causing negativity, either for yourself or to who you're speaking to or somebody else, and you're always grateful, gratitude and kindness with it. Now, look, I'm not saying that you're weak. I'm not saying that people walk over you. I'm just saying that when it comes to malevolence, it's largely unnecessary, and it doesn't do you any good but create negativity for yourself. You're harming yourself. So if you find yourself being malevolent to somebody, then they're obviously not fit to be in your life or worthy of being in your life. Either go and tell them the truth and sort it out, or don't have them as part of your life. So work on malevolence and get yourself to a place where you're grateful for everything that you've got, that you can be kind, you can be caring, you can be generous, you can be well-intentioned for the best of everybody, but you've still got to have that dragon of adversity, that truthfulness to say, you've crossed the line there, we need to talk about this. And then you're not prey. You're just a person that can take hold of life and make it what it can be by a balance of kindness and empathy, non-malevolence, and aggression to stand up for yourself just by telling the truth. So I think that answers your question, Matt.
It absolutely does. So number one is always tell the complete truth. Number two, believe in yourself. Don't believe the lies you tell yourself.
You're always good enough. Never ever accept
you're
not good enough. You know, now you're good enough today, and tomorrow you want to make yourself a tiny bit better. And that's a journey, but you're good enough today. And this thing came out of psychology in the 70s, and it really pissed me off. The psychologists saying, "Oh, you're just the way you are is good enough. You're perfect just the way you are." No, you're not. You're on a journey to improve every day, to make yourself better and improve the way that you perform and improve other people's lives and make sure your children and all of those things that are vital. You're not good enough the way you are. It's okay this moment to accept who you are, but do not accept that is it, because that is not it.
There's more. Yeah.
There's always more. and you work at that day in, day out.
Absolutely brilliant. Number 3, remove malevolence. I want to also just say, if anybody has been watching this now and they want to get in touch, they want to, or even just to follow you online or so on, can you just give us a little bit of info? How can people find your content? How can people get in touch if they want to maybe book a session, anything like that?
I literally just use Facebook. So I've done some YouTube videos in the past, and
no dance routines on TikTok yet?
Well, I looked at the dance routine. Everybody's dancing these days. What is it? I look round and everybody's dancing. I'm thinking, what's going on here? The world's gone mad.
You need to do it. It's all those narcissists.
Well, we'll have to get a dad dancing TikTok or something where, I don't know. Well, everybody's dancing. It just seems to be the thing. Let's dance. I don't know.
So they can find you on TikTok. Facebook, just your full name, right?
Yeah, Rick Cardwell. Rick Cardwell on Facebook. Yeah, I've got loads. Everything I've done videos. There's 1,000 videos on there, Facebook Lives or stuff I've done and testimonies and things that just sort of give you an idea.
And they could just contact you through there.
Message me through there. Yeah, I do what I do. I give out a lot of free advice, a lot of help people. People can't always afford therapy, and I try. I'll have 45 minutes, an hour conversation with anybody who's in a situation, and hopefully I can give them some advice and guidance. It's not therapy by any level because, it's obviously therapy's therapy. But I answer a lot of questions and I talk to a lot of people and try and point them in the right direction. And I'm always, always, always happy to do that. I'm in a fortunate place now where, life's good. Things have happened that I can relax a bit more. I don't need to do the things I was doing. So I just use Facebook and that's about my lot, really.
Brilliant. Okay, final question just before we hand over to the Q&A. Rick, what is your personal definition of success?
Now, the most common answer to that would be happiness. And I would say, I don't know what that means. My personal definition for success is sharing my life with somebody that I love, coming together in a partnership, and hopefully allowing that to make the world a better place.
Rick, amazing. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That's great.
Oh, thanks, Matt. Thank you.